and the seller says, Karen, I'm not in a rush to sell. I don't have to sell. I don't want to sell. Okay, that's completely okay.
No, yeah, we sold it. We broke a record for the square footage and the price per square foot. So we're fighting for the homeowners up there because there's some agents selling some stuff. I'm like, how the heck did they sell it for that little?
But there's going to be a difference in size and streets, like everything. Like I've spoken to appraisers and some of them have told me, Karen, I've never really given a ton of value to views.
It's another thing when there's a completely neutral third-party entity that has no vested interest in the sale of the home. When they come in and they're like, sorry guys, I can't give my sign off on the value of this home, that happens. That can be the end of your escrow. Today we're talking about the revenge of the appraisers in Pine Mountain Club. Okay, it's not that big of a deal, actually.
Yeah, we're gonna essentially be talking about how an appraisal impacts the selling price and the mortgage amount. And those are two very important things because selling price is very important for sellers.
Yep.
And obtaining a mortgage is important to buyers.
It's a balance.
We need to talk about what that means here in Pine Mountain Club and what we're seeing or what could potentially happen if the appraiser does not give a property the value that you're under contract in.
Yeah, the only reason that we're bringing this conversation up is because once in the last 3 years, this has probably never happened to us, but we've seen it. Now we're seeing it kind of on a handful of times. Our colleagues are kind of giving us a call like, hey guys, we got this bad appraisal. Can you confirm that the price is good so we can share a comp? We've had some clients where it was like, oh my gosh, it's okay. Like we didn't get the appraised value, but then we had to pivot and we haven't seen that in a while. So we're
especially in the higher price homes.
Higher price points for sure. And the reason we're bringing this up is because it's one thing when we quote you a price, you could be like, oh man, they're lowballing us. They're not giving us an honest price. They just want to sell this house as fast as they possibly can. It's another thing when there's a completely neutral third-party entity that has no vested interest in the sale of the home. When they come in and they're like, sorry guys, I can't give my sign off on the value of this home to approve the loan at the current offer price. And that's a big deal because if that happens, that can be the end of your escrow. You're going to lose the house for really a marginal amount of money. And it doesn't need to happen. You don't need to get to that point where, because then the buyer knows like, hey, I'm paying at the absolute very top of the market based off of somebody's professional, neutral, third-party opinion. And some people may not be comfortable knowing they're paying at the exact ceiling of the market. So the goal is you want to price it to where you're at the top, but you're not showing your hand to the buyer that you're at the absolute top of the market if you're a seller. And you want to avoid the appraiser coming back with a bad number because then you may fall out. You're going to have to do the price reduction anyways, and you're probably going to get lowballed after that. So it's one of those things you want to avoid it. And I think today, both of us, we're going to help people understand like why it's important and kind of how to avoid some of these things, you know?
So really, no matter where you are, specifically talking to buyers right now, we're going to be addressing this perspective from a buyer and a seller point of view. If you are a buyer, no matter where you are in the buying experience or the buyer process, the home buying process, an appraiser is going to be a very important part of the process if you're financing, because they're going to determine the value of your home and how much a lender could essentially give you and finance the property for.
Right.
And so to kind of help people understand a little bit about the process of what is an appraisal, how an appraisal, is obtained, and this is what happens, right? So property goes on the market, and let's say a property's worth $300,000, just to kind of make it easy math. $300,000. They go on market, and that's what the seller is offering. They're saying, I'm willing to sell this house for $300,000. Again, depending on where that property is with market value, if it's a lower market value range, then the properties are, there might be a little bit more competition. You may get more multiple offers. But if that $300,000 is a little high for what that property, the specs of the homes, the bedroom count, whatever the property is, then you may not get that many offers, right? You may get a lower number, or you may get the full ask amount that you want, which is $300,000. If it's a cash deal, an appraisal is optional. So the buyer could determine, could request that and put that in the offer and, say, hey, I do still want to get an appraisal. And that's at the buyer's discretion.
Right.
But the seller could also say, I'm not allowing that. However, if it's an FHA, like I said, VA, USDA, conventional, really any type of financing, an appraisal will always be required. And really, what is an appraisal? An appraiser is the best way to estimate your property's fair market value based on the location, condition, and recent sales of similar homes in the surrounding area. And beyond an estimate of how much your property is worth, an appraisal also indicates the amount a lender will let you as a borrower borrow for the property. And this is crucial because, again, we've talked about this time and time and again. Just because a seller wants $300,000, that doesn't mean that that's what the property is worth.
Yeah.
So we got to look at this from both perspectives, and we got to consider as a buyer the importance of what this means if it comes under. If it comes higher, that's amazing. But if it comes under, the implications are you will be responsible for paying that difference or bridging that and providing that to the seller.
If there's no budging, if there's no negotiating and they're just forcing you to pay that, then you have to pay it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so again, the property goes on the market. To just kind of go back to the process, $300,000. Let's say I have a buyer and buyer offers $300,000. Most of the time, your agent will probably let you know, hey, this is a little high for what the market right now is.
Yeah.
Or they'll say this is at market value, this is at fair market value, or this is below market value. So there'll be more offers. Let's say a client of mine wanted to submit an offer in house at 123 Banana Street for $300,000. And I advised them and I provided them comps saying this is too high of a house. But they still say, no, Karen, I want it no matter what. And I would disclose as an agent. You should, if you don't have an agent that does this, we always disclose with our buyer, hey, these are the comps. At the end of the day, it is the offering price is at the discretion of the buyer.
Yeah.
The buyer gets to decide whether or not they, whatever they want to put down is on paper, is on them. I always have a recommended price. I always have a strategy. But if the buyer's like, I want it, Karen, and I understand that this is above market value, but I want the house, I don't want to lose it, I'm willing to pay above it. If the appraiser comes back lower, great, we proceed.
Cool.
Right? We proceed, we write an offer at $300,000, we go through the process, and the lender would be in charge of selecting a third party,
neutral.
A third party neutral, and to do this appraisal, an appraiser, they're called appraisers, and they would go ahead and we have no contact with them. If I'm working with the buyer's agent doesn't have contact.
Just to schedule.
The lender doesn't have contact with them except for the third party connecting with the administrative side of the third party company that supplies the appraiser or that independent appraiser. And really the listing agent is the only one that's going to have connection with the appraiser to open the door. So
sometimes it's not even that. They just show up, lockbox, and they don't even want you to be there sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. But they're always going to be in touch with the listing agent at some point. So a seller, be aware of that. And your agent should be in communication with the appraiser and should be providing them comparables. And they should be making themselves available about certain features of your house, especially if it's above that market value.
Right.
And so again, I'm saying this to help you understand. Property goes on the market. You write an offer, the lender then, orders an appraiser. And, what does an appraiser do? An appraiser, essentially, the home appraisal process it's completed by a licensed individual called an appraiser, like we talked about. And the appraiser essentially can tell you, the buyer and your lender, how much the home is really worth.
Yeah. And the thing is, so I'll interject there real quick. They're not using some model that's like, they have some special formula. They're doing the exact same thing we do as realtors before taking a listing to market. So there's actually 4 approaches that appraisers use. This podcast isn't called Appraisals and Cuddles. So I'm not going to go through every single model. But there's the cost approach. It's basically like how much it costs to rebuild that house. There's the income approach, which is how much income can that property produce if it's like a commercial or a rental unit.
Or if it was an investment.
Or an investment.
Buyer.
They can base value based off of that. There's the sales comparison approach. Now that's actually the same approach us as realtors use when we're determining your price before we take it to market. So they use the sales, and all that means is they're just looking at everything else that's sold and they're coming up with an average to see if that number makes sense when somebody puts an offer in a house. And then there's the cost approach. Again, that's more like commercial stuff, industrial stuff. It's not really, it's almost rare that you'll ever see any of the other three approaches. You're typically seeing the sales comparison approach, where they look at everything else that's sold in the neighborhood.
In the last 6 months.
Yeah, in the last 6 months to a year. And they'll be like, okay, I can justify this price. Like, I feel comfortable writing my name on this and not seeing a future lawsuit because there was like tampering with the price or lying on the price when it really wasn't worth that much. Because these guys, their license is on the line too. So they want to make sure that they're giving their best recommendation for a home price. They don't have any interest in the home. They're not purchasing the home. They don't work with the lender. They don't work with the seller. They don't work with any of the agents. They're just like, I'm objectively coming to look at this house. I'm looking at what it looks like, the finishes. I'm accounting for all those things. Like, does it have a garage? This report's super thorough. They look at everything. Like, it's freshly painted or the decks were stained. Like, they look at all that stuff. And then they can say, okay, you guys are offering X amount, 100K. I feel good about this house being 100K. But sometimes they show up and the house is kind of a wreck. It's really distressed. And they're like, you want that same 100K for this house? I don't know if I can sign off on that. And then that's kind of what happens. You know what I mean? So that's like the appraisal process. And they're using the same model we use before we even advise our clients to list a home.
And that's why when you are a buyer, it is crucial for you to sit down and understand with your agent what fair market value is.
Yeah.
And where that property lies, whether it's kind of at the lower end of that market, the higher end of that market, or if it's fair market value. Right. We had a situation recently where a client was very interested in a property, and every buyer is different and wants to do their due diligence, and that's completely okay. But this was a scenario where this house was really well priced. Like, it was under that kind of fair market value, and we knew it was going to go quick, and it went quick. So when properties are priced correctly under that, at the lower end of that market value or at a fair market value, they will move quicker. And that is why we're seeing some properties go under contract within anywhere between a couple of days to a month, at least the most recent in Pine Mountain Club. Some of the properties that have just been sitting on the market and they're in the high end of that market value.
Yeah, they have
or they're even above market value, and people are they know that because they see the comparables.
Yeah, and those houses, unfortunately, have the scarlet letter of days on market. Like, they've been sitting for so long.
Yeah, they've been sitting for 100 days, 200 days, 300 days. And as an agent, even though we have a recommendation and we sit down with sellers and we say, hey, this is what your property is worth, right? We do comparable analysis for all of our sellers and all of our clients, or that's what a real estate agent should be doing. They shouldn't just say, oh, you want $500,000 for your house when realistically the market value is $300,000 for it. They should be sitting down and showing you metrics. They should be showing you the data for the last 6 months. Some properties in Pine Mountain Club, we just sold a house, and it's the highest sold house in the last probably 6 months.
We're holding the line, man, for the sellers.
It's for $599. So, but before that, there had not been a property sold at that number for, I think, probably closer to a year. There was something, but it was outrageous, but not for that square footage. Our square footage was around 2,300, and the last property that sold for $599 was a property double the size. It was 5,000 square feet.
Right.
So we definitely beat another record just for sellers. So we are, but this house was pristine, construction, newer construction,
2 years old,
turnkey.
3 years old.
It was just, it's one of a kind. So I feel like a lot of the times sellers have this notion of, I just want this number. And I know sometimes they need it. Sometimes it's not even I want it. They're like, I need it for health expenses. I need it for moving expenses.
All that stuff.
I need it for retirement. I need to go and buy another house at another place, and minimum those houses there are X, Y, and Z. I understand that, but I'm here to give you market value. So sometimes we'll advise sellers and say, this probably isn't the right time to take your property to market. And they get to decide whether or not they want to take it at a certain number. We don't recommend that you take it way above market value or even above market value. And we want you to stay within that fair market value because the buyer is going to see that you mean business and that you want to sell your home. So that is very, very important because when an appraiser, we just had a situation where a colleague called, reached out and said, hey, is this property of yours going to close soon? Because I don't, my house is not getting appraised.
Yep.
And I said,
hasn't happened in a
just,
while. Like this frequently.
It's your lucky day because we're setting a new precedence in Pine Mountain and we're helping all these other agents by closing our homes. Number one, we're the number one real estate agent in Pine Mountain Club. We are the top producers. You could go back and look at our sales this year. Nobody has sold the amount of houses that we have sold, not even close. So in both sides, both buyer and seller and collectively. But what I will say, and I take a lot of pride in that. I say it and I take a lot of pride in that because we work really hard. But what I was trying to go with that is that when we received that, connection or when they reached out, I said, some appraisers come up here and it is a very unique area, may not know, may have never comped it because there's nothing alike. There's not a side-by-side. A comparative market analysis is a side-by-side comparison of homes that have closed within a certain period of time. When I do a CMA, a market analysis, that is what I'm doing for my clients, for my sellers and buyers, but there's no side-by-side. There's no alike property. Every property is different. Even if it's built by the same builder, there's going to be a difference in size and streets. Like there's everything.
Views,
like
all that stuff.
Views. And views don't really, I've spoken to appraisers and some of them have told me, Karen, I've never really given a ton of value to views. It's been like one or two houses, but.
Which they should because location is important.
It just kind of depends. Yeah. But for example, if your driveway's like this versus this, it's going to make an impact as to what a buyer potentially may want to offer on it. So it's not, at that point, it's not so much that your house isn't worth it. It's just more convenience, right?
Yeah.
So if you're at the higher mountain, but I went on a little tangent. What I'm trying to say is sellers need to really consider what they're taking their properties to market at. Again, if you're within that fair market value and your property is potentially, we can't guarantee anything. We could only advise you. We could only encourage you. We can show you our numbers and show you where the market is at and where it's headed potentially. We can't guarantee that you're going to get, but if you position yourself at a certain, range or in a certain, within a certain market.
A lot of times because the appraisers they're not familiar, they're probably they usually ask you, it's like, hey, can you send me the comps you use for this house? So the ones you showed your sellers, they're the same ones you're sending to the appraiser.
Correct. Yeah. And if you have nothing to, like, for example, going back to the $300,000 house, 123 Banana Street, if all of my comps are at 250, but I am trying to sell this house for 300, this 300 house better have upgrades that demonstrate that.
Like beautifully
like a new roof, like air conditioning.
Maybe the new garage that wasn't there.
Like additions, permitted additions. The appraiser will give everything value in a house, but up to a point. And that's what you meant. They do this cost analysis where, for example, let's say there's 3 houses. In the three or more houses, I'm just giving you an example. There's more actually in appraisal report. If you ever bought a house and, they're essentially doing this plus or minus, like for certain things, right? When it was built is important. What type of this and that, like they take everything into account. So be rest assured that they're going to see that value, and it's up to your agent, if you're a seller, up to the agent that is representing you to support all the information, support all those updates, and be in communication with the appraiser once they reach out. So I think it is important for both buyers and sellers to be listening to this podcast and to really consider both sides of it, because as a buyer, you don't want to over commit yourself to such a high number that when push comes to shove and the appraiser doesn't value it at a certain number, you are in a predicament where you either have to pay it, meet that gap, or because the seller is in the right to say no to you.
Yeah.
Or they may not want to negotiate. And we had a situation where our client was really firm and said, when an appraiser came under and our client was very firm and said, I am sorry, we cannot do X number.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the number.
Yeah. Let's contextualize this. So segueing, that's beautiful. That is a really good point. So we contextualize it to PMC because that's actually good advice for anybody, not just PMC. That's like any city. It's the same process. That doesn't change.
Correct.
But let's contextualize that for the Pine Mountain Club area. And the reason it's important to contextualize it is because it's a second, it's a kind of a second property market. It's like a secondary market. But before we jump into that, yeah, we sold Ashwood. We broke a record. That deserves a yay. Woo! So we're fighting.
Just sold a property. It's, if you want to look it up, it's 2012 Ashwood Court.
2012.
It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It was, it's a little under 2,300 square feet. 599.
Yep.
No concessions. None. And my seller is ecstatic.
She's super excited. And got rid of it.
This is our second time selling this house.
Yeah, we sold this house second time. We're gonna
Within
sell
the
it.
last
We're gonna sell it again in like
3 years. Sorry,
5 years. We're gonna sell it again. I'm calling it. But no, yeah, we sold it. We broke a record for the square footage and the price per square foot.
So it's gonna help all of our agents out there. So thank you.
So we're fighting for the homeowners up there because there's some agents selling some stuff. I'm like, how the heck did they sell it for that little? So we're fighting for prices. We're trying to keep this market stable and not let it drop below because everybody's just selling to, I don't know, get paid. I have no idea. But we want to keep prices up. That's our goal as agents. Is we hate seeing comps go down because it affects the whole mountain. So we're trying to keep our comps up, break records every time we sell a house. So I'm super stoked for that. But let's contextualize this. Let's jump into it. The reason that it's important to not go above it is because everybody wants a deal. And if you don't get a deal, you almost feel cheated. And so going over appraised value, that already shows your hand to the buyer. You're not getting a deal on this house. You're paying the maximum amount of money that you could for this home. So as a seller, you don't want to show that hand because then the buyer kind of like, I don't know. And they start having doubts at that point. You're planting seeds of doubt in the middle of a transaction. You're 20, 30 days into the deal. What if that buyer buys out? You're just 30 days wasted on the market. As a seller, and this is what tends to happen. Tell me if I'm wrong. The appraisal comes back. The seller doesn't want to budge $5,000 or something ridiculous. What ends up happening to that seller is 6 months down the road because they fell out of that escrow.
If they don't budge, I mean...
Do they end up selling it for more?
No, probably less.
They sell it for less. Historically, that's what we've seen.
It just kind of varies on the property, the condition. I mean, if it's a property that's just not doing that well, I mean, it's a lot of work. And then of course, more days on market means buyers are going to desire the property a little bit less, or they're going to want a little bit more of a break.
Yeah.
I had someone call me the other day and say, we're specifically looking at properties that have been on the market longer than X amount of days because we're looking for a deal. And we've bought properties before. And I said, I can't guarantee you that the seller is going to give you a lower number because the property's been on the market for 100 days. But certainly if they still have it on the market, it could be one because they have a contractual agreement with that agent to keep it on the market for X amount of days. Yeah. But most likely if it's empty, they want to sell it. They want to get rid of that piece of real estate. They want to invest the money somewhere else. And there's some level of motivation when you put the property on the market. People don't just put their property on the markets to just put it on the market.
Exactly.
They have an intention to sell. So that's why we tell our sellers all the time.
Well, some do. The people that I don't need to sell it right now, those people, but they need to sell it.
When I hear that from a seller, and I just want to address that. Yeah. Okay, let me address that real quick since we're here. Sometimes we get calls from sellers, and we appreciate every consultation. We appreciate every consideration, every referral. Thank you so much for those that are referring, for those that subscribe to the newsletter, share it, and recommend people, send people our way. We appreciate all of you. When we go into these seller consultations, and the seller says, Karen, I'm not in a rush to sell. I don't have to sell. I don't want to sell. Okay, that's completely okay. It's really everybody's in different seasons. Everybody has a prerogative. Everybody has their own timeline. And then when they say, Karen, I want to sell my house for $600, but I've shown them comparables and data saying their house is worth $500, but they want to sell it for $600. I most of those times don't think I'm working with a very motivated seller.
Yeah.
When they're telling me I don't really have to sell,
well,
I don't want to sell, I can hold on to it. That's okay. But sometimes we walked away from those situations, or sometimes we've said, hey, you need more time you need to wait and hold on. And because it's not healthy to just put a house on the market to just put it. Because your house is going to have it's going to resonate a certain way with agents and with buyers.
Yeah.
And there's histories on every month, and every property. We could go back and look at that history. Got a client that was interested in a certain property. We ended up offering full price what they wanted now, because this is the second time they've taken it to market with another agent. And that's great. I'm glad that we made a deal, but I had to tell them the history. And that, for some clients, motivates them to move in another direction.
Right.
Or sometimes it motivates them to say, well, let's just wait to see what the seller does. Maybe they'll want to reduce it. Right? Because they know that the property is not market value. So when you're a seller and you're telling me, Karen, I don't have to sell, that's okay. When people call me and when people want our services, we're here to sell real estate. We're here to help people buy into real estate, invest their money back into real estate, transition you into another situation. I would just say, really consider what your purpose and motives are before you consider that and you start having those conversations.
That just communicates to me that you want to test your theory on my marketing budget. And that's not fair. I'm just going to be real. That's not fair for me to put as much into this deal and then for you to just be like, it's not working, I'm pulling it. I'm out over $1,000 because you wanted to test a theory. I'm not going to do that for anybody.
Unfortunately, we had a situation where a client somebody hired us and only gave us 2 weeks to try to sell a property.
I don't even think it was that.
Or 18 days or something along those lines. And that's really the only property that we never, not really, it wasn't out of our decision.
No.
I really do feel like we would have sold that property, but it's just, we work really hard as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we are investing our resources, our time, our dollars, because it takes money to do good marketing.
Yeah. And we take all the risk until it's sold.
And we really take on all the risk until it's sold. So when somebody comes to me and says, hey, Karen, I want to sell my house for $600 and everything,
I don't have to sell it.
Everything is looking at $500. I don't really have to sell it. That's telling me that this seller is not really ready for this market.
No. Or respecting you as a seller and what you do as a living. That it just shows like there's a lack of consideration for your expertise.
Right. Yeah. And I really do feel like, I just had a conversation with the client and he's like, Karen, we trust your expertise. That is what we hired you. Again, I am really grateful because it really, when people are receptive and they want to move forward and listen to your advice, like you would anywhere. Like if you're not in, like that's why people have therapists. That's why they have financial advisors. That's why they have coaches. That's why you have bosses if you're working a 9 to 5, because you do need that guidance. And real estate is the same. And as local experts, we work this market very well. I know every single property that's on the market. I know everything that's going pending, or, I pretty much.
Well, and you've sold 100% of your inventory.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? So, and with buyers it's a little different, because sometimes, some offers may or may not be accepted, or it's a little bit more variable. But we still support a ton of buyers. Like we just went under contract with the buyer last week, on a law and a home. We're about to go potentially under contract with another property. So we're constantly supporting buyers too. But I just feel like sellers and buyers, keep in mind that this is such an important thing. Looking at fair market value and approaching it from that perspective. So as a seller,
both sides,
I appreciate you giving us an opportunity. And I do appreciate it. But at the same time, I'm here to not make you I'm not here to just have you give me a listing because I'm going with your number.
Yeah.
I'm here to represent your interest for this market, because I love this market and I will make sure it's taken care of. And that's why too, we fight. Like for example, certain properties, we have to fight for certain values, because if a property does not get a certain value, that means the rest of the community
everything comes down. It's catastrophic.
Comes down.
Yep.
Because then they have that comparable, or that precedence is set.
It's bad. I see it a lot with off-market people. They're just like, it's a good price, take it. And I'm like, no, because then it's like everything else in that price range just got gutted. They just lost 15 off their what they could have gotten in the past because they didn't want to push their price. That kind of pisses me off, to be honest.
I think there's a couple of things that we just, you got to think about as a seller. Be aware of the market. Be an expert of the market. We could set you up to have you get monthly evaluations on your property. So sign up at our newsletter and we'll continue to send you more information. Send us an email. And I think the biggest thing for sellers, I would say, is make sure you're working with the local expert. That is why we only support 2 markets. We're not the type of agent that's trying to do I'm everywhere. Pine Mountain Club, Fraser Park, and we do support as well in Bakersfield, as some of you know. But Pine Mountain Club is where we live, do life, and do everything that we do, right? So, and I think that one of the things that I will say is you want to make sure that you understand that market value. And when that market value is understood, that you create a strategy with your agent. And that's what you hire an agent for, right?
Consultant, yeah.
So if you do want to be kind of at that top of that, range, what would that look like? If you want to be whatever that strategy is. But if it's going to be something way above, just get ready for 1, your property sitting on the market, seller, or 2, your property not appraising. And then you being in a predicament where the buyer's not willing to pay you X amount of money.
Yeah.
Right? Or you lose that deal and you go back on the market. So that's one thing for buyers. And then I think to leave sellers with, I think these are my last kind of wrapping thoughts, are make sure you have your agent run comparables for you when you're submitting an offer. Because at the end of the day, it really is your responsibility. We have an advisory sheet called Market Conditions for the California Association of Realtors that everybody in a transaction needs to sign. And it essentially states there, time and time and again in the contract, but this specific advisory tells client, the market is cyclical. The market in any market, Pine Mountain Club, we're talking, of course, about Pine Mountain Club right now, but any market is cyclical. It varies, especially when it comes to offering. It's really up to you as a buyer to determine, no matter what your real estate agent advises you or the comps they provide, it's really up to you. I mean, most agents, you hire them to really take their advice, but if you really want the house and your agent is saying, hey, it's not worth more than 300, it's worth 250, but you're like, I'm willing to pay 300 and I'm willing to see it through, then that is definitely your decision. And as long as you understand that, go for it. And just be prepared, because if a property doesn't appraise, it either 2 things are going to happen. Either the seller is going to be willing to negotiate that gap, or the seller is going to say, sorry, I'm leaving this escrow. I want this number. But seller, if you let go of that escrow, you're going to have to disclose to that next client
it's not worth this much.
Price.
Yeah.
So that is why marketing your property at a number that's realistic and fair market value is important, because it's going to keep the community from going and appreciating at a consistent way versus, unrealistic, and it makes your property suffer.
Yeah, totally. So that's good, man. So my final thoughts on this is just, be smart. It is still a good time to sell, but you want to kind of fit in that pocket. If we're in a secondary market, so all these buyers, they're so scarce, they're hard to come by. If you have a good buyer that's motivated, don't let them go for like 10, 15. It's not, dude. 20 years from now, when you cash out your 6 figures from this house, you're not going to regret the $5,000 because the appraisal didn't come through. You're not. You're really not. You're going to close out. The headache's gone. Somebody has a house that they love, that you loved for a season. Like, everybody wins in that situation. So don't lose somebody over, because you already knew it was high coming in. A neutral third party confirmed that it was over that amount. And then you lose the buyer because of a certain level of pride. It's not worth it to anybody, really. Because historically, if you go back to market, you're probably going to end up losing even what the appraisal was. You're probably going to come in under that anyways because it sits for so long. So that's like kind of the moral of the story. But I think this was a good combo. We're seeing it's kind of real time what's happening up there.
It doesn't happen all the time, but the fact that it's happened, in Pine Mountain Club, and people are reaching out, other agents. It's telling me that those properties or those sellers that are just still this, are at the above market list price.
It's confirmation.
It's confirmation. And that is why there's still about 55 properties on the market, even though a ton are going under contract.
It's all the new
there's
ones,
still
though.
this, why is there this lingering 50 average? Because there's a good amount of them that are still in that high or above market value.
Okay, before we close out, how many properties would you say are like, they're probably going to sell out of those 50? And it's kind of a rolling number because the new ones are selling quick.
Anything coming on the market that's priced at fair market value is moving very quickly.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
I'm talking anywhere between 2 weeks to a month.
Yeah.
Some of them have even done, before that. And I think it's a little hard to say, but
Probably half that, about 30.
Yeah, there's a good amount of them that are way above that fair market value.
Yeah. I'd say like 30
I'm talking. There's one that's like $1 million almost.
That one's ridiculous. I would say there's about 30 houses that are going to sell in the next 3 months, and then everything else I don't even consider it part of the comps
Some
anymore.
of them were just like, this is a complete outlier. Like I don't even. Sometimes people call me. Just a quick little last thing. Sellers will call me and say, "Well, Karen, I just saw a property go on the market that's just like mine, and that it's 500,000 or 700,000 or $1 million." And I'm just because a property goes on the market at a certain number, it doesn't mean it's going to sell for that. There are those agents and that are willing to take a property way above market value. That is doing you a disservice, I believe. Yeah. I think
the golden ticket is pendings. So we always call, because we're pretty close with all the agents up there. We always call the pendings and see what they're at, because then that gives us it's our crystal ball into what we know our houses are going to close.
Some
for.
of them, and some of them, are it just depends on where they're at in the escrow as well. Mm-hmm. Like I know somebody recently called me and was like, "Hey, what is so and so property going to close that?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're actually going to close this week, X number, yada yada." And then they're like, "Oh, this is going to definitely help my comp, my property, because theirs was higher." But again, it's one of those things where I'm glad we're supporting the market, and I do feel like Ashwood sold at a really great number because it's worth it. It was worth that number, and it definitely appraised at that number. But it's one of those things where you just got to go back and look at the value of your home and understand that, because I know we all have sentimental value. Sellers, I know good. I'm an owner too.
Yeah.
Every time I walk into my house in Pine Mountain, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this and that, but I know that if we ever were to sell our house, someone may be like this or that, and like they may have their preference, and they might not see the value we see because of the way that we see life, or the way that or what we preferred, or the money we put into the property, or the memories. So just keep that in mind, and make sure you subscribe to our newsletter down below so that you can be getting updates on every single podcast we do.
Oh, yeah. So thanks, guys. Good conversation. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Closings and Cuddles. Bye.